Facepalm America, I'm Beowulf Rockland. FacepalmAmerica.com is where you can go to get more information about the show, listen to past episodes, connect with us on social media, and you can always either message us or call us. And I do indeed pick up the phone. I was very surprised to get a call from a former colleague who took issue with my review of Killers of the Flower Moon. And the one thing that he told me when we spoke, the first thing, was he was surprised I picked up the phone. I do actually do it. And you can call me at 202-656-6271 if you would like to communicate, either directly verbally or via text. Either is fine. If you have seen the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or if you have read that book, you will know that there was a time in this country when disability and mental illness was dealt with in an absolutely horrific way. There was a system of institutions in the United States of America at which, very bad things happened to people, and people were shut away, people were essentially stockpiled, and the particular peculiarities of their individual illnesses were not addressed at best, and at worst they were just like shunted away into a room, hardly ever to be seen again. And we're very fortunate today to be able to speak with someone who has had direct experience with an institution of this sort. It's Dr. William Bronston is our guest today. And the book that he has written is Public Hostage, Public Ransom, Ending Institutional America. Dr. Bronston, welcome to Facepalm America. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, sir. It's really an honor and a pleasure.
So you were involved at the Willowbrook State School. Where was that, and what kind of an institution was it?
Willowbrook was located in Staten Island in New York. It was variably a Halloran hospital at one point, which was an actual medical facility. It became an Italian prisoner of war camp in its history, and ultimately became a warehouse for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, quote unquote. I mean, that was the theory of the organization, of the agency. But actually what it was a way of getting rid of unwanted people from the greater New York metropolitan area. They came in from Jersey, they came in from all over New York, and the place essentially was established to handle roughly about 2,700 people. When I got there in 1970-71, it had 6,000 people crammed into its stone, empty, horrendous, violent walls.
Wow. So more than 200% of capacity it was at.
Yeah.
Wow.
Be clear, Beowulf, that there's a real difference between psychiatric putaways and developmental disability putaways.
Yeah.
The psychiatric community essentially is still commandeered by the psychiatry profession. But in New York, there was a bureaucracy that was responsible for all institutions, and it was the Department of Mental Hygiene in New York, headed by an appointed psychiatrist commissioner who essentially was doing the bidding of the financial sector that essentially financed the entire service delivery system in New York. They never set foot into the consequences of their investments, their financial investments, and the superintendent never set foot in the facilities that he administered. Instead, there were administrators in each of the roughly 60 facilities that were built in the state of New York, all of them larger than 200 beds.
It's just incredible. And, it was, I guess, from an earlier era than that, the late 1940s or the early 1950s. I'm guessing, and I don't remember the name of the particular institution that I had a colleague once describe to me that his brother was put away in an institution and essentially like never heard from again. And I'm guessing that even that much later, even in the 1970s, you saw a tremendous amount of, as the term goes, warehousing, just people being put away, who could have been worked with just because broader society, or at least the medical establishment, did not want to deal with them in one way, shape, or form, and that was at that time considered to be the most convenient thing to do. I mean, clearly this sort of thing had gone on for a long time. I mean, what did you see when you were there? Like, and what capacity were you there in?
I was a ward physician. I was hired in order to deal with initially a building that had 200 broken young children in it first. And then when I created too much of a problem in terms of demanding quality medical services, I was shifted to another smaller complex that was a hospital improvement program granted to the state of New York to kind of create a facade of respectability at some level in the concentration camp. And I worked there for a year to clean that place up. And then when I tried to reorganize it in order to really matriculate the youngsters, the preteens that were in that particular building, 134 of them, I was then, in punishment, put into managing a building of 200 adult women, variably between 200 and 1,000. I was either in charge of one building or in many instances 2, 3, and 4 on the female side of the institution. I just want to say a couple things. First of all, I want people that are watching and listening to understand that nothing substantial has really changed. We are still in a situation where now all of us, every single one of us watching this show, is essentially aimed at institutional terminus. All of us, because as we age, we're going to become intellectually and developmentally disabled in one form or another. We're going to wind up in nursing homes or supported living or hospice programs, all funded by the same channel of monetization that essentially generates billions of dollars of profits for private and public entities. And so my book is a harbinger alert.
Yeah.
People to understand that we have to think radically about transforming the economic system and the social system in order to cope with the fact that each one of us is different. We may have one kind of special need or another, but we are all different, and we are all aimed to the same terminus. We're all going to get old and die, and we're going to lose capacity. We may lose mobility, speech, cognition, whatever it is, medical problems, but we have to have a system that cherishes and empowers and integrates and includes all of us as we age in a society that's respectful and nurturing and democratic.
Yeah, it will almost inevitably impact each one of us individually, and if not us individually, if we're very, very lucky, almost certainly, someone that we know, someone that we love, someone in our families. And I can tell you from experience within my family in the last couple of years that I have seen, even to this day, while it is a different sort of a system, it is in many ways similar to what you are describing that took place in the 1970s when it comes to nursing care and elder care, and it can be very disturbing, and certainly unless you have someone, unless you have a family member that is there and visiting on a regular basis, like you will be ignored, and there will be cries and sometimes screams throughout the hallways unless you are, or someone on a regular basis is there to make sure things get done, even in places that you would assume are very upscale, that supposedly have a lot of money in very high income communities. It is not it is probably worse in poor communities, but it is still. There are enormous problems, regardless of where you go in this country, with this kind of system. So you are absolutely right, and in some senses, there has been a shift in terms of the way that we deal with disability, intellectual disability, and there has been a shift onto a different kind of system where the onus is more on the caregivers, and that's most often the parents, and of the parents, it's most often the moms who are dealing with that, and that has its own set of problems to it. But I'm wondering if we could take a step back, and I would love to know, when you went into this situation as a young doctor in the 1970s, going into the Willowbrook State School to begin with, what were your expectations? What had you heard about it, and what did you actually see? And feel free to get specific as to some of the things that you saw.
Well, first of all, I was trained in California. I got my medical degree at the University of Southern California, and then I did my internship at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, which was one of the most sophisticated and extraordinary healthcare facilities in the state of California. And my mentor was the chairman of the Child Development Department at Children's Hospital. And he was my mentor during my whole 4 years of medical school, where I was a fellow in his department, essentially under his wing, learning about home-based services for families that had a kid with suspected developmental delay. His name was Dr. Richard Koch, and he was really one of the great medical pioneers in the field of human services in the world. And I was just lucky to have him as my teacher and my guardian and my mentor all the way through the time that even I was at Willowbrook working.
And just to pause, was he a sort of a precursor of the home-based system that eventually replaced the institutionalization?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Dick was the pioneer that essentially architected with the legislature the regional center system in the state of California. The state is broken up into 21 regional centers that essentially are serving anybody with a developmental disability, which is a limited number of disabilities: epilepsy, autism, mental retardation, cerebral palsy, and some learning disabilities. And everybody is required by law to have an individual program plan for their lives that's renewed every year with their families.
Right.
And the agency has money, state money, in order to purchase services needed for that individual in order for them to make it out there in the world. And then as a result of the hammer blow that we brought down in the 70s and 80s, we were able to engineer the program in the education system that essentially requires every kid with a special need to have an individual education plan, renewed every year.
Right. IEP,
and the same thing existed in the federal vocational rehabilitation system, where the law requires every one of the clients of that entitlement program to have an individual work rehab plan in order to get them into remunerative work. So there's precedent for individualized planning. What we have in our system now is that all of us that are essentially removed from work situations, earning a living, essentially become surplus population. And the system has set up a way to turn us into commodities, to monetize us. So Medicaid and long-term care is the model established in the 1960s that created this entitlement program. But the money from Medicaid, 50% federal, 50% state, essentially forces people into permanent poverty. You can't have more than $2,700 altogether. But the worst thing of all is that the money does not come to the family. The money essentially goes to the facility where the person is placed. And so facilities became the living entity in that service